Let's jump right into this explainer. Imagine for a second standing completely alone against a massive, infinitely resourced entity that can literally dictate your everyday life. That is exactly what it's like for an individual facing the state. Without written boundaries, you're entirely at its mercy. But that's where our fundamental rights come in. Found in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution, these are basically the ultimate house rules of our democracy. They're the non-negotiable guarantees of your civil liberties, built to ensure you can live with dignity, completely free from the threat of arbitrary power. So here is our agenda. First, the Magna Carta of India. Second, defining state and law. Third, Article 14 and true equality. Fourth, Articles 15 and 16 covering social justice. And finally, Articles 17 and 18 on human dignity.
Section 1. The Magna Carta of India, the historical weights of rights.
Before we unpack the specific articles, we really need to recognize that these rights weren't just handed to us overnight. Look at this massive historical leap. It literally starts way back in 1215, when wealthy barons forced England's King John to sign the Magna Carta. Fast forward to the 1789 French Revolution, demanding inalienable rights against feudalism. Then, jump to India's own Nehru Committee demanding a Bill of Rights in 1928. This entire global legacy is what finally culminated in our 1950 Constitution. It's an incredible evolution of humanity, restricting absolute power.
Which brings us to Section 2, defining state and law, the umbrella concepts.
Before we can explore the rights themselves, we have to figure out exactly who we are being protected from. We need to define this massive entity called the state. Well, Article 12 casts a surprisingly wide net. It defines the state as not just parliament or the central government, but also state legislatures, local municipalities, and get this, even private entities if they're acting as instruments of the state, like a private contractor managing public parking. Interestingly, though, the judiciary is generally excluded from this definition when it's performing purely judicial duties.
And then we have Article 13. This introduces the immense power of judicial review. You can think of this as an automatic constitutional tripwire. The rule is simple. All laws inconsistent with fundamental rights will be declared null and void. The moment any law, custom, or tradition clashes with your fundamental rights, the judiciary instantly strikes it down. It is a massive protective shield for citizens.
Moving on to Section 3, Article 14, True Equality, Balancing the Scales.
With the ground rules set, we reach the absolute cornerstone of Part 3, Article 14. This elegantly splits the right to equality into two halves. First, you have equality before law, which is a negative concept borrowed from the British. It essentially restricts the state, meaning absolutely no person gets special privileges and no one is above the law. The second half, equal protection of laws, is a positive concept from the US. It dictates that people in equal circumstances must be treated alike. Same circumstances, equal treatment. Now you might be thinking, is equality totally absolute? Well, no. If applied too rigidly, the government would literally freeze up. So we have very practical exceptions. The president and governors enjoy specific immunities while in office. MPs and MLAs have parliamentary privileges so they can debate freely without the constant fear of arrest. Even journalists get protection for the true reporting of parliamentary proceedings. You know, these aren't loopholes. They exist specifically to ensure the machinery of democracy keeps functioning smoothly.
Section 4, Articles 15 and 16, Social Justice, the Reality of Equity.
Moving from abstract equality, these next articles tackle a much tougher reality, the need for social justice in a highly diverse developing nation. Article 15 bans discrimination in public spaces. But the absolute crucial word here is only. The state is banned from discriminating against you only on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. So, for example, if a university denies you entry into a specialized medical program because you didn't study biology, they aren't violating Article 15. They're just applying a valid educational qualification. Then, Article 16 takes those exact same protections and extends them directly to public employment under the state. It basically guarantees equality of opportunity in government jobs, while adding a couple more protected grounds to the list, specifically descent, meaning your ancestry can't disqualify you, and your residence. But here is a really interesting paradox the constitutional framers had to grapple with. How can the Constitution ensure true equality if historical discrimination has left some communities far, far behind? I mean, if communities have been marginalized for centuries, treating everyone exactly the same today doesn't actually result in real equality, right? Because they aren't starting from the same position.
To balance this, the Constitution impartially allows the state to create targeted equity exceptions. Under Articles 15 and 16, the state is explicitly permitted to create special policies for the upliftment of women and children, for socially and educationally backward classes, and for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. This ensures they get adequate representation and structural support. To put that into perspective, let's look at the numbers. Following the Mandel Commission's report, which found that other backward classes made up roughly 52% of the population, a massive policy shift happened. A 27% reservation quota was established specifically for the non-creamy layer of OBCs, targeting those who hadn't yet reached a certain threshold of economic and social advancement. And this definition of disadvantage continues to evolve. In 2019, through the 103rd Constitutional Amendment, a 10% quota was introduced for economically weaker sections. This was a significant acknowledgement that severe economic disadvantage also requires structural support to ensure true equality of opportunity for all citizens. And that brings us to Section 5, Articles 17 and 18, Human Dignity, Erasing Old Hierarchies. This final leg of the rulebook shows how the Constitution actively dismantled traditional, oppressive social hierarchies. And it wasn't just a theoretical promise. It triggered concrete legal action in 3 distinct steps. Step 1, Article 17, outright abolishes the practice of untouchability. Step 2, the Protection of Civil Rights Act in 1955 gave this real teeth, establishing actual penalties. In Step 3, because exploitation still persisted, the SC and ST Act of 1989 introduced strict surveillance to punish any severe civil rights violations. To completely seal this focus on equality, Article 18 abolishes all state titles. The state cannot confer artificial superiority. Now, you can absolutely be recognized for your hard work. Being a doctor, a PhD, or a military general is perfectly fine, which is why academic and military distinctions are excluded. But inherited titles of nobility, they hold zero legal weight today. We're all just citizens, first and foremost.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to reflect upon. If these fundamental rights, this invisible rulebook standing between you and the overwhelming power of the state, if all of that vanished tomorrow, how drastically would your daily life and personal liberties change? Without these articles, we'd be right back at the mercy of arbitrary power. It's a pretty stark reminder of why these rights are the very air we breathe in a democracy. Thanks for diving into this with me.